The city was already trembling beneath a restless moon when the forensic envelope finally slid across the polished table, silent, heavy, and trembling like it carried a ghost. For weeks, fans had begged for answers, reporters had chased shadows, and investigators had worked in a suffocating fog of contradictions. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared anyone for the moment the seal broke. The room felt colder. The walls leaned in. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Because inside that envelope was a story no one expected to read. A story that twisted through hallways of truth, deception, missing time, and a revelation so intense that even Yu Menglong's closest relatives recoiled in disbelief. And that was before they reached page 2. This wasn't just a forensic report. It was a detonator. A fuse. A spark that would set the entire mystery ablaze. The forensic chamber should have been ordinary. Routine. Predictable. But the moment the team stepped inside, something felt wrong. The temperature refused to stabilize, the sensors glitched twice before warming up, and the atmosphere carried a trembling tension that crawled along the skin. Even the lead examiner admitted her hands shook the moment she approached the examination table. It wasn't fear. It wasn't superstition. It was the heavy, unshakable sense that something, or someone, had been there before them. The steel platform still carried a faint warmth, far fresher than anything the official timeline suggested. Even before the examination began, the first contradiction whispered through the room like a warning. At 9:14 a.m., the first shock arrived. A thin crescent-shaped mark appeared on the left shoulder under UV light. It wasn't a cut, a bruise, or a burn. It was a pattern. A symbol. Perfectly curved, impossibly precise, and glowing with a faint ultraviolet pulse that no organic injury should ever produce. The technicians took photo after photo, circling it with red ink in disbelief, yet none of them could match it to any object, surface, or medical tool. It didn't resemble anything found at the scene. It didn't resemble anything human. Under magnification, the pattern quivered faintly, like it remembered movement. Like it wasn't just a mark, but a message. The second shock came when the lungs were examined. A senior pathologist froze mid-sentence, his clipboard slipping from his fingers as oxygen traces, far fresher than expected, showed up on the scans. Not minutes off. Hours. A direct contradiction of the recorded time of death. The lungs presented a timeline that did not match any official record, any medical log, or any statement previously given. The possibilities were terrifying. Either the timeline was wrong, or something happened after the fact, or someone had manipulated the initial findings. Nothing made sense. Nothing followed logic. And yet the evidence stared back, undeniable and clinical. Shortly after noon, another discovery twisted the investigation into even stranger territory. Lodged beneath the collarbone was a fragment, small, smooth, and translucent, unlike any natural material. When placed into the analysis machine, the device glitched, rebooted, then flashed a red error message stating the material did not match any known profile in its scientific database. Not bone. Not glass. Not metal. Something else entirely. Something that carried microscopic lines shaped like circuitry too small to belong to any device currently invented. The fragment was not an accident. Not random. Not explainable. It was introduced. Inserted. Or came from something that defied every scientific principle in the room. But nothing compared to the discovery that left the entire investigation team speechless, a missing 43-minute window in the biometric logs. A gap. A void. A period where sensors recorded nothing. No temperature readings. No movement. No environmental data. No vitals. Just silence. Every backup was checked. No malfunctions were recorded. No power interruptions logged. The blackout existed in isolation, an empty block of time that made no logical sense. During that missing window, the body showed signs of subtle repositioning. No fingerprints. No equipment logs. No explanation. Only the silent implication that something, or someone, interacted with the body during those 43 minutes. When the report was finally delivered to Yu Menglong's family, their reactions were even more intense than anything recorded in the investigation logs. His sister, reading the section about the crescent mark, dropped the paper as tears blurred her eyes. His father, reading the oxygen trace contradictions, trembled so hard the page rustled like a storm. His mother, quiet, composed, and staring deeply at the section describing the missing time window, whispered something so soft investigators nearly missed it. He wasn't alone. But the line that shattered everything sat at the bottom of page 12. A line so unexpected that every reader paused before letting it sink in. It stated that evidence suggested the subject may have regained partial responsiveness during the undocumented interval. Not full consciousness. Not complete awareness. But responsiveness. A word heavy enough to split the investigation open. A word that implied he might have reacted. He might have sensed something. He might have been aware, even briefly, during the 43 missing minutes. When the family reached that line, the weight of the discovery broke them completely. Grief twisted with confusion. Shock collided with hope and horror. Tears filled the room, and the lead investigator stepped back, unable to offer any explanation that didn't sound like fiction. Because if that line was true, if even a fragment of it was real, then the entire case had to be re-examined from the beginning. Reporters flocked to the building. Fans flooded every platform with theories. Experts argued on national broadcasts, each insisting the evidence must have been misread, misunderstood, or misinterpreted. But the facts refused to bend. The crescent mark existed. The lungs contradicted the timeline. The unknown fragment defied material science. The 43 minutes remained unaccounted for. And the possibility of responsiveness lingered like a ghost that refused to fade. The forensic report was supposed to bring closure. Instead, it fractured every known narrative and opened a vortex of new questions. It didn't end the mystery, it amplified it. It didn't silence suspicions, it ignited them. Every line raised new doubts. Every detail pointed toward something stranger than fiction. Every finding hinted that the truth was buried deeper than anyone realized. As investigators closed the file that night, the building hummed with tension. Screens flickered. Phones buzzed endlessly. Conversations crackled through the hallways. And yet, in the midst of all the noise, one truth hovered like a shadow neither light nor logic could dispel. This story was not ending. It was cracking open. Expanding. Escalating. The only question that mattered now spiraled through every mind, every newsroom, every whisper online. What happened during those 43 minutes? And who, if anyone, was with him? The mystery was no longer a case. It was a storm. And the world was bracing for the next wave. The envelope still sat on the center of the table long after the room emptied, its corners catching the flicker of the overhead light like it was alive, breathing, waiting. No one wanted to touch it again. No one wanted to be the next person to feel the weight humming beneath that thin layer of paper. People walked past it with their shoulders tightened, eyes turning away like it was a serpent coiled and ready to strike. But even then, the presence of that envelope pulled at the air like a tide. It was impossible to ignore. It had already changed the room, changed the building, changed the direction of the entire investigation before the first page had even been fully absorbed. The moment the seal broke played on repeat in everyone's mind like a trauma they hadn't processed. Investigators swore the temperature dropped by at least 4 degrees. Someone in the corner claimed the light above flickered the second the adhesive separated. Others said they heard a faint click, like something unlocking inside the envelope itself. Whether it was imagination or something else no one could name, the truth was undeniable. The energy shifted the instant the flap lifted. That night, the room felt wrong. It wasn't just cold. Cold was simple, measurable, explainable. This was deeper, heavier, like a breath pressed against the skin from something unseen. The walls felt like they had grown ears. The air felt thick enough to swallow sound. Even the floor under their shoes felt different, like it was waiting for something to happen. One technician later admitted privately that she thought she saw the envelope move. Just slightly. A twitch. A tremor. A ripple along the paper. She told no one at the time. She didn't want to sound insane, but the way her eyes lingered on the table after that confession made it clear. She wasn't joking. Every detail of that night felt like a warning disguised as routine. The forensic gloves snapped louder than usual. The paper rustled sharply, too sharply. Every breath seemed amplified, bouncing from wall to wall like the room itself was holding on to every sound as evidence. And the strangest part? The investigators weren't sure what they were reacting to, the envelope, or the story hiding inside it. Before they even began reading, the tension spiraled like a storm forming quietly above their heads. Every person in that room had worked difficult cases before. Violent cases. Mysterious cases. Cases that made the strongest detectives walk out to breathe. But none of them had ever felt dread before opening paperwork. None of them had ever felt their pulse rise simply because an envelope existed. The eerie stillness continued when they lifted the first page. The paper was unexpectedly heavy. Not thick, just heavy. Weighted. As though it carried more than ink. And the top line, just a routine identification line, felt wrong in a way no one could articulate. The letters seemed darker than they should be, as though printed twice. The date stamp was slightly blurred, yet crisp around the edges, a contradiction that made two examiners exchange looks. Something about the report felt too fresh, too recently handled, too recently updated for a document that was supposedly finalized days earlier. Even the odor of the paper was strange, sterile, metallic, with a faint hint of ozone, the scent left behind after lightning strikes. A static edge crackled through the air, brushing across their hands like invisible sparks. One technician swore she saw a vein in the paper pulse, but she blinked and it was gone. Then came the moment that changed everything. The first photograph slid out. The UV image. The crescent mark glowing with a light that seemed to vibrate, almost shimmer, like it was still active. The glow cast a faint blue reflection on the table, and for a heartbeat, long, cold, breathless, it looked like the mark was illuminating the paper, not the other way around. The room froze. No one touched it. No one breathed. Someone whispered, "What is that?" Another whispered back, "I don't think it wants us to know." Every eye locked onto that mark. It felt like a stare. Like a presence. Like something watching them back through the photograph. The energy in the room shifted again, a low hum rising in the air like something electrical awakening. When they finally continued reading, the air trembled with a strange mixture of fear and fascination. The temperature dropped further. The light above dimmed, then brightened as though reacting to an unseen pressure. Papers fluttered slightly though no one moved. One of the pens rolled across the table by itself, stopping precisely at the photograph's edge. People swallowed hard. Every instinct in their bodies screamed that the room was no longer empty. And as each new line was read, the atmosphere thickened. Words like inexplicable, unclassified pattern, not consistent with known injuries, and luminescent properties echoed with a weight that felt too heavy for language. But the most disturbing part of that first section wasn't the mark. It was how the technicians reacted when they examined it in person earlier that week. The lead pathologist wrote that the mark began glowing brighter when they moved closer, as though responding to proximity. Multiple witnesses claimed the light flickered with their heartbeat. One said she felt an icy pressure on her arm the moment she leaned in. Another said the room's silence changed, like a low vibration began humming just beneath hearing range. Those details were whispered between lines, tucked into the margins, scribbled in the tones of people who didn't want to write the truth but had no choice. By the time the investigators finished rereading that opening section of the report, everyone in the room felt the same thing. This wasn't just a forensic mark. This was an event. A moment captured on skin. A message from something that didn't belong to the world they understood. As they placed the first page down, the building's old ventilation system rattled suddenly, loud enough to make every head snap up. But it stopped just as quickly. Too quickly. Like it wasn't a mechanical glitch, but a reaction. Something about that envelope had stirred the air. Something about that room felt alive. And every investigator present understood the same chilling truth. The story hadn't even begun yet. Something had entered the case the moment that seal broke. Something none of them could name. Something none of them were prepared to confront. Something that was now watching. Waiting. And the deeper they went into the report, the more every heartbeat whispered the same thing. They were not opening a document. They were awakening it.